Hey Techno Studs! In this video, we're going to talk about different approaches to troubleshooting. The last video, we talked about the steps to troubleshooting, but there's different ways that we can go into to start testing our networks out and start troubleshooting our networks. So let's talk about those different approaches. In this video, we're going to be talking about using the OSI model and how you can go from the top down or bottom up to start troubleshooting the different network components. We're going to talk about following the path and figuring out where there's a break within the path. We can talk about substitution and how we can use substitution as a method to replace and test different pieces of equipment and different elements of your network. Then we'll talk about comparison and how we can use comparison between a piece of working equipment and a non-working equipment. And then finally, we'll talk about what it takes to make educated guesses. If your devices are not able to connect to a certain service, then perhaps one of the ways that you can troubleshoot is using the OSI model. The idea behind this is that you're going to work your way one direction or the other on the OSI model. So here we have the OSI model, and we have different tools that we can test each one of these layers out. So for instance, we can do ping, which would test out our layer 3 to see if we've got connectivity all the way through. We have other tools that will also help troubleshoot with this, and we can step through these different layers and do these different tests with these command line tools. There's another video I'll show you about some of the command line tools that you can use. But for this purpose right here, we just need to know that if we're using the OSI model, we would start out at layer 1 and work our way up, or vice versa, we would start at layer 7 and work our way down. Or there's also a divide and conquer method where you would divide and say, okay, I'm going to test everything down here or everything up there. And then if I find that the connectivity issue is somewhere down here, then I can divide these two sections up and test down here or up here between that and slowly narrow it in. And so that's the divide and conquer method of doing that. So just realize that this is one of the methods we can do is we can start at the physical layer and take a look at the link light. Then we move up to the data link layer and see if the Ethernet packets are going back and forth. We can take a look at the layer 3, see if there's a ping that goes across there, or we could go the reverse and start at layer 7 and we do an NS lookup to see if we're even getting DNS resolution. So there we can work, we can use this model to approach our troubleshooting from a logical perspective. Then we have the follow the path method of doing this troubleshooting. So for instance here, we have two devices right here, and we know the network that's in between these devices. We try doing a ping, and we know that we can't get from this PC to this workstation right here. So something is stopping it in between. And so what we can do is we can test out by, let's say maybe we ping devices in between to see how far we get. Or maybe we ping another device over here on this other network to see if the network is reachable. So we can follow the path with this, and we can start testing each one of these hops that we have here to see if we've got actual connectivity. So that is the follow the path method. Then we have the substitution method of troubleshooting. So in this example right here, I've got a couple switches. This could be done with any hardware that we want to maybe substitute one piece of hardware for another piece of hardware that we know is good. So for instance, let's say one of these switches is not working correctly and we don't know why, but the other switch is still live. This is the back of the switch right here, and they have dual power supplies, and we know that this bottom switch is working. So maybe what we do is we take the power plugs that are plugging into here that we know is operating the switch just fine, and we plug them into the top switch to see if it's even getting power. And then if it's still not working, then we realize, well, then it's not the power cord because those are known good power cords. So now we suspect that maybe it's these power supplies. Well, these power supplies happen to slide out, so we could slide those out and then take the one from the known good switch that we know is operating and slide them in and then test that out. I'll point out that these also have fans the same way. And so we can pull fan out of the switch where the fan is working and try it out in the switch where the fan is not working. And if it doesn't work, then we know that it's the slot. If it does work, because that is a known good fan, then we know that it's the actual fan that's having the problem. And I always like to take that fan then and the one that we suspect is not working and plug it into the port that was working before on the bottom switch, and then just to verify that that fan is not working correctly. When it comes to devices, another thing I like to do is comparisons. If we have a device that we know is working and a device that is not working correctly, then one thing I'll do is I'll compare the configurations to see how the configurations are looking. And so if I know that this switch is working and there's some sort of configuration that's different between these two devices, I can say, aha, well, maybe if I change the switch that's not working or the device that's not working to the configuration that is on the working device, maybe it will function correctly. I can do the same thing by comparing maybe some stats that are on the machine to see like how they're responding to certain things. So once again, so I can kind of test out to see what the differences are, especially if I've got some information of how the device was performing in the past. Then I have good information to know if the device is performing differently. And so we will be talking more about that later on, but we do want to get some trend data, some information on how these devices were communicating or how they were working in the past, so we can compare to see what the differences are. And then we have the educated guess. And the educated guess gets more and more accurate as you get more and more skills. In fact, actually, when you go through this process over and over and over again, you'll get really good at starting to see common issues. And if you're practicing those troubleshooting steps, then you'll get a lot of application to those, and you'll just keep getting better and better as you go through this process. So in fact, I've even gone to the extent where when I implement changes or when we actually make changes on some of our equipment to figure out like what's going on and what's working and what's not working, I'll actually put well, I think that this has a 70% chance that this is going to be effective and that will actually work. Or if I implement it and I'm not very hopeful, I'll say that, I think there's a 30% chance that this is not going to, that we're going to be successful, and we're probably not going to be successful. And over time, you'll become more right with those estimates as you go along because you've seen this stuff before. As we take these different approaches, it kind of depends on the technology that we're working with. For instance, if we're working with networking gear, one of the ways that we can troubleshoot is that bottom up or top down or that divide and conquer with the OSI model. We can, if we have a really good understanding of that network, or even if we don't, we can have some tools that we can test the links along the way and know if there is a break somewhere within the path. I find that I do a lot of substitution where when I have a known piece of good equipment and something that I know is not working correctly, I'll start swapping things out to see what is broken on it. And then we will do those comparisons. We'll talk about those baselines a little bit later, but we also have comparisons where we're comparing configurations of a known good piece of equipment with one that isn't working so far. And then once again, with time, you'll get better at making educated guesses on what your network is doing and how to troubleshoot it. I hope these videos are really helping you out. If they are, I'd really appreciate you hitting that like button.